I loathe government and believe the free market can provide all the services the state does with better efficiency and more humanely. One of the excellent quotes from this new book, The Kids Are Not All Right, by Mance, Rayder, forward by Dave Smith, and stamp of approval by Jeff Dice. Today we have the podcaster Mance Rayder. You can find him at freemanbeyondthewall.com. I have his YouTube and his Twitter in the description below, along with a link to purchase the book on Amazon. Mance, how are you?
I'm doing well, man. How are you doing? It's always good to talk to you, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that. What is it that attracts people to being on the left?
I think it starts out being, I think in most cases it starts out being humanitarian. There's been a narrative that's ran for 100 years that people who are Democrats, people who are on the left, they care about people. They want to they want to do whatever they can to help the downtrodden and the poor. And I mean, that sounds good to anybody, especially young people.
Yeah, and that's why I like right at the beginning of your book, you have a meme. I won't give it away, any of the memes, just because it's such a gold mine. But you talk about how instead of focusing on people actually using voluntary means, charity, to achieve their ends, they're so focused on confiscating people's income. And it's amazing that this position has been holding the moral high ground for so long in our country. Speaking of things, I'm sorry, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I would say the reason that it stays as the dominant narrative is because most of the people in media carry this belief, promote this belief. So if people get their news from the guy, and it's such a terrible played term, mainstream media, if they get it from TV, if they get it from cable news, that's who they're getting it from. They're getting it from people who have this ideology that the only way to help people is to steal from the people that have, because they either inherited it or they stole it somehow. According to the left, no one's ever made their own money. No one's ever been poor. And I mean, I grew up dirt poor. I shared a bedroom with my two brothers until I was 18 years old. I grew up in the South Bronx, two bedroom apartment. Not the worst building in the neighborhood, not the best building in the neighborhood. But when I turned 18 and thought about leaving home, I had nothing. And everything I have now has been the result of good decisions. And I mean, I'm not one of these people who promotes hard work, because I think the Protestant work ethic is just another bullshit talking point. But I'm one of these people who just did it on my own, and I don't believe anything I have was stolen. I don't believe nothing I have was inherited. That's for sure. And they throw out this narrative that no one's, if you're rich, you either did something wrong or you inherited it. And both of those are, if you did something wrong to get it, that's wrong. But if you inherited it, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you spawn and have, kids running around, you want, it's natural for you to want their life to be better than yours. I mean, my parents wanted that. They weren't the greatest example. They didn't set the greatest example, but they said that. And I think that's natural. And I mean, basically the left goes against human nature in saying that, inheritance is bad. I mean, the left goes, that's just against human nature. That's against natural law. It's against friggin' basic Darwinism. I mean, if you want to go that way, it's also again, it would be against any religion where you're taught to cherish your children. I mean, it's basically against any narrative that has grown in the West in the last 250 years.
Yeah, well, if parents if it's in the culture that parents create a good life for their kids, The left really isn't getting subjects that can be dependent on the state in the future. So simply by constantly combating any sense of religion in the home, any sense of being part of a family, any sense of being part of a community that's voluntary, the state definitely feels threatened by. And yeah, there was an article in the New York Times. 80% of millionaires are first generation. So yes, it's very easy to say, well, anyone who has something got it immorally. But that is just a current justification to confiscate private property in the future. They're trying to really push you.
Let me bring something up. Okay, I live in Atlanta. Actually, the city I live in is formerly Atlanta, but I can still get mail in Atlanta. I live in Atlanta. Okay, Atlanta has the more millionaires of Black African descent than any other city in the world. What did they do? Who did they rob to get it? What did they do wrong? Where did they inherit it from? I'm sure. I'm sure. Hey, there are some old money, Black families in Georgia, and I've met a lot of them, and they're like some of the nicest people you will ever meet in your life. But there are a lot. I mean, the colleges here are 70 to 80% Black enrollment. So I guess we need to do something to stop that, because they're just going to go out into the world and make something of themselves. And the only way you can make something of yourself in the world to make $1 million is if you're hurting somebody else. These people, fuck these people, man. I'm fucking sick of these people.
I wonder if it's sort of projecting when they say the only way people can make a lot of money is they had to have stolen it. Because what I think they're saying is, I can't think of any way to meet consumer demand at that amount, make so many things that people value. I can't think of a way. Therefore, no way is possible. They must have gotten it through enslaving people or hurting the poor, because it really doesn't make any sense.
Well, what you just said implies that they came up with this thought on their own. And one of the main messages in my book, which is chapter 2, is that they did not come up with this idea on their own. They came up with this idea because of what I call the villains, the college professors, who are going to teach them this absolute evil ideology. And if these kids are not raised in an environment where they're told about the horrors of Marxism, where they're told about the horrors of communism, they're told about the horrors of collectivism, they can easily, the young mind, they say the human mind hasn't truly matured until it's 25 on a biological level. So they're easily influenced. They're easily influenced by this. They think that they think that there's evil out there. And these generals and colonels, these college professors are putting together an army of purple and pink-haired monsters to go out into the world and tell anybody who's out there doing for themselves that they're evil and that we need to take as much money away from you and give it to somebody else.
Yeah, and by creating the illusion of everyone who has it has gotten it through male privilege, white privilege, through slavery, through exploitation, through colonialism. The big five, I'm going to start calling it. Everyone who is wealthy got it by some way of those means. So therefore, I know you college kids don't want to steal stuff, but it's not really stealing because they've gotten it through one of the 5 methods. Now, that I think is the ultimate goal, to make it seem less legitimate that this property belongs to someone who got it through voluntary exchange or original appropriation. And that's how they're going to try justifying confiscation.
Yeah. They God, I'm trying to think of the H.L. Mencken line about as soon as the idea of humanitarianism or doing for other people is always a disguise for tyranny. Just to paraphrase Mencken, I own first edition Mencken, so I'm I'm embarrassed right now to not be able to have that to have that line perfect. But yeah, I mean, it's an excuse for tyranny. It's an excuse for telling other people what to do.
Well, Larkin Rose and I were talking about this, that Plato even said the tyrant first appears as a savior, in the way that in order for someone to justify having large amounts of power over others, they have to first say, this group, that group is dangerous, whether it's blacks, whether it's whites, whether it's terrorists, whether it's immigrants, whether it's the rich. They say, this group is terrible. In order for me to fight them, I have to get a ton of power. Also, when Bernie Sanders talks about taking like half to 90% of people's income, he first needs to come after the AR-15s. So it's all interconnected. Even when you're talking about gun control, you're still talking about the institutionalized aggression against private property.
Rules for Radicals, Zelensky, man, that is they've all adopted that book. They've all adopted. I mean, that's just pure Alinsky. It's an evil fucking book, man. It's an evil ideology. You know, like I said, living in Georgia with a large black population, you know, when I go to the gun range, it's not all white guys. There's a lot of black gun owners out there. And, you know, I work with a couple people who, you know, older black gentlemen who, you know, have guns because, well, they're older. They can't defend themselves. They can't defend themselves physically anymore. If someone breaks in, they need to have something that can equalize it. It's the same thing for women. You know, women, there should not be one woman on the planet who is anti-gun because, you know, I mean, with the exception of probably a couple of MMA, you know, people, you know, women who have trained their whole lives how to handle themselves. You know, most women on the street, any man can destroy because they just have physical, you know, upper body strength that they don't have. And I know women don't. I know there's a lot of purple-haired women that don't want to hear this, but it's just true. And yeah, the gun is the great equalizer. The gun can can take a 12-year-old, can level the playing field, you know, between a 260-pound, 6'2" man and a 12-year-old girl that weighs 85 pounds. And all they care about is, you know, and as horrible as Parkland is, as horrible as Newtown was, this is not, I mean, these are anomalies. These are outliers. They're not the rule. You know, we just have this instant news cycle and this culture of outrage. Trying to take guns is especially guns that could possibly be used against a hostile force like an out of control police or rogue military. Trying to take those away is just, you know, one step towards being able to march in and just start taking people's stuff. I mean, we already see it. I mean, they do it if they want. They do it if they want to, and if you don't, you know, they'll shoot you. I mean, why does the IRS need 2 billion rounds of ammo? Why are IRS agents carrying guns? I mean, it's trying to take away guns from, you know, people who are just leading their lives and not hurting anybody is some of the most evil stuff. And you know, it's a step. It's a step in the direction that we saw in 1917 Russia and, you know, 1933 Germany. I mean, I hate to invoke Godwin's law so early in the conversation, but you have to.
Yeah, I remember thinking on election night 2016, if you would have said to me, you know, the left is going to start a big movement called the Resistance. They're going to march on Washington the day Trump gets elected, and they're going to have Trump take all the guns, and they're going to keep pushing cops are racist, misogynists. I'd be like, no way. That's too much of a contradiction. Even they'll see that. They're not going to say, they'll say, well, we'll have gun control when the cops start acting well, and when Elizabeth Warren gets into office. That's still wrong, but there won't be such a blatant contradiction. Nope, there will be. Now, I was watching CNN the other day with my dad, and they had Anderson Cooper and Brian Stelter talking about how horrible Laura Ingraham was for criticizing the Parkland students. And it just hit me like a sack of bricks. This is why they push the kids out there. Because if the kids say it and you disagree with them, you're anti-kid. If Obama says it and you disagree with it, you're anti-black. If Hillary says it and you disagree, you're anti-woman. What are some of the cultural Marxist leftist methods that you see they use to use propaganda and sort of make their point without any logic or reason?
Well, I mean, it's all without logic or reason. To choose one that you said, criticizing Obama, you're anti-black. I mean, I guess that means every black person that criticized Obama was anti-black. Every woman that criticizes Hillary is anti-woman. Every kid that criticizes the Parkland, the Parkland 4 or 5, whatever these kids are anti-kid. I mean, it's basically they make shit up that sounds good, that sounds justicey. I'll invent a word, justicey. That like these social justice warriors. One of the examples I use in the book is that if they saw a business that didn't have a handicap ramp, they would not get money together or take donations and build a handicap ramp. What they're going to do is they're going to make people who aren't handicapped feel bad for having functioning legs. They're going to make you feel bad because it's like poor people. If you try to suggest how to get poor people out of poverty, well, they don't want that coming from somebody who's actually gotten out of poverty. They want to talk to somebody who's poor. I mean, they don't have, think about it. If you want to talk about how to get somebody out of poverty, talk to somebody like myself who grew up in poverty and has made something of themselves. I'll tell you how I did it. And it wasn't very hard. As a matter of fact, the most important thing is to change your mind, is to change your thinking. I grew up in New York City. Until I moved out of New York City, the thought of ever owning a house or owning a condominium or anything like that was foreign. And most people in New York City rent. The overwhelming majority of people in New York City rent, and that's just what you do. So by getting out of that situation, that government control, that basically it's like a behavioral experiment. That's what I think New York City is on a lot of levels. That the first thing you have to do is people have to be able to change their minds. I've changed my mind so many times in my life, and I think that's why I am where I am right now, is because I'm not averse to studying new information and changing my mind about it. Going back to how do these monsters deal with this is they look for a perceived injustice and then create like, if they see, like, I use the example, if an orphanage needs to be built in a town, say I've built an orphanage in another country. I've actually gone to another country, given my money and my time to build an orphanage. We did not go into that town, find the richest person in that town, and guilt them for not participating in something that they probably didn't even know existed. But this is the kind of thing that these people will do. They'll go into a neighborhood and see some kind of perceived injustice, and then they'll look for people in that neighborhood that are doing a lot better than the people who are having this, cosmic injustice being performed against them, or not even cosmic. I would use the word, a perceived injustice, an injustice because of the patriarchy or something like that. And they'll go and search out somebody in that town who, is doing very well, and they'll, start railing against them and try to destroy them because they're not helping. Instead of like going to that person and saying, look, we have this, you have this problem in this town, and we're going around trying to raise money voluntarily so that we can, build this house for somebody, or we can build this wheelchair ramp. Would you be willing to donate either your money or your time? They don't do that. They make everything into a political spectacle. They make everything into they make everything activism to call attention to the fact that there are these disparities in culture right now, where there are some people who are insanely wealthy and there are some people who have nothing, not taking into account, not stopping to ask why, but just, it has to be something. It has to be something that the person who's doing very well did to stop, to cause this person to be poor. And I also use the example of, people say, you can come to the United States and you can get, if you work hard enough, you can get your piece of the pie. Well, that's not accurate at all. You can make your own pie. And it's that easy. You don't have to. By saying that you can get your piece of the pie, they're implying that you're going to be taking from somebody else. No, you can come to the United States. If you come to the United States from another country, you don't even speak English, but you create a drug that cures, that no longer you'll need kidney dialysis. This drug will take care of that for the person. They'll be able to live a long and comfortable life. Well, that person deserves to get paid for what they're doing, and they created their own pie. They're not taking a piece of somebody else's pie by doing that. So I can go on about this forever, so please go jump.
Well, it's a little incredible that isn't taught in the 12 years of government education. They don't bring up, okay, when you trade, say, this book for a certain amount of money, which party benefits? Well, I benefit because I get the book, and the other party, you, benefit, and the third party, Amazon, benefits. So when you look at it like that, people only exchange because wealth is created on both sides of the equation. Mm-hmm. When they don't point that out, then it's cool to vilify the rich because there's just a pie. People are just born, and some people have bigger pieces than others. No need to look into it. No need to recognize other pies can be created. You said something interesting about, if you're so anti-poverty, let's find a bunch of people who've gotten out of poverty and just interview them. They're stealing $4 trillion a year. Let's spend a couple dollars maybe on that. Well, it's interesting. Peter Schiff called the financial crisis while everyone was laughing at him. You can look up Peter Schiff was right on YouTube. And why is anyone on the mainstream media that isn't Peter Schiff? He should be everywhere until we all figure this stuff out. Every congressman should want an interview. What did you know? Tell me what led you there. What books did you read? Have you written any books? Give us your best advice now. So it's amazing that people think without these people there would be chaos. I really have trouble believing that without these politicians that there would be any type of chaos.
Well, Thomas Sowell said that, he took a lot of flack back in the 80s because he would be called before Congress to, talk about economic matters when something was being discussed. And recently, when he was being interviewed, he said that he stopped doing that for the sole pun reason that he knew that they had to have his opinion there. They weren't going to listen to him at all. They were going to listen to the Keynesian. They were going to listen to the person who was going to talk about how the government can solve the problem. But they had to be able to say, okay, we listen to somebody from this side. And when you think about it, these social justice warriors, these purple-haired Triggly puffs, they they're learning. They're learning everything from the government. I mean, they act just like they act just like the government. The government doesn't want to figure out a way to let people do things on their own. They want to be the catalyst for it. They want to get reelected. And they do the same exact thing that the people are doing. These people on the far left are doing the same exact thing that the government does. They're blaming it on anybody but themselves, and they're saying, well, somebody else has to do something to do this. So someone like Jesse Jackson, who for 50 years has been running around and going to corporations and basically blackmailing them and fleecing them, saying, you don't have enough black employees. Give me $250,000, or I will start protesting this business until you get more black employees. And they'll pay him to go away. And this is noted. I mean, there's books have been written about this, that this is what he did for, this is what he did for years and years. This is how he accumulated his wealth. And that's what these social justice warriors are doing. They're going around and they're just basically saying, okay, we need to rob people. We need to destroy people's reputations. We need to destroy people's livelihoods because they're not willing to do what we deem as being proper and quote unquote right and moral.
Yeah, my social justice society would just be all interactions must be voluntary. The fact that they haven't come up with a solid explanation of what their ideal society would look like shows me that it's much more of like this critical theory approach of just constantly attacking to make it look bad so you can justify further change. I mean, come on, out of all the talks that Bernie and Elizabeth Warren and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton have given, I'm still waiting for a big social justice definition they can all agree upon.
Well, it's better if they keep it vague.
Exactly.
If they keep it vague, then no consensus can ever be had. And when it comes right down to it, we don't want a consensus, because when they find consensus, that's when shit really goes bad, when shit really goes wrong. I'd rather, it's like people talk about, the government's at a standstill. They're not doing anything. I'm like, God, I wish. You don't see what's going on behind the scenes. It's not like the payments. It's not like the money to the billions of dollars to Israel are stopping, and the billions of dollars worth of weapons are stopping to go to Saudi. And it's not like it's not like Northrop Grumman's not getting their check. It's just that this is all just a charade. It's just to make you feel like you need them, because they might not send grandpa his Social Security check.
Yes. Now, you mentioned Thomas Sowell earlier. I was listening to him on the Dennis Prager show a long time ago, and Dennis Prager said, so what's with this gender pay gap? And Thomas Sowell goes, well, without even getting into those statistics, because the statistics are men work different jobs and work longer hours. That's why, as a group, they get paid differently. He just goes, if it were true, wouldn't one company just hire women and then put their competitors out of business because they'd lower their prices, 23% employment, their biggest cost? And Dennis Prager laughs out loud and says, I never thought of that. And it's amazing that the gender pay gap, this is a huge cultural Marxist trip, the gender pay gap still lives on.
I don't know if I can't remember that I even addressed that in the book, but that would have been a good one to address. I mean, I've seen that interview where I've seen it's a good 5 minutes, and I don't know if it's the Prager one or Sowell's on a panel, and it's like all women and him. And by the time he just breaks it down for like 4 minutes and just absolutely destroys the myth of it. The women are just frothing. I mean, they're I mean, it's like they just want to kill him, and it's like, and that's when Thomas Sowell ceases to be a black man, because now he's no longer down with the narrative. It's so, I mean, I heard somebody the other day say that Thomas Sowell was a sellout who writes books for poor, ignorant conservatives.
Oh my God.
And like his new book, Discrimination and Disparities, is I read 2/3 of it in one sitting. I mean, it's not a long book, but I mean, he goes through it and just shows how, it so much, it's so much more than theft. He talks about how the firstborn or the only child, it almost inevitably outdoes the other siblings. I was on a conference call the other night, and there were 5 of us, and we were talking about libertarian ideas, some advanced stuff, and really getting deep in the weeds. And someone brought up race and IQ, and I said, hold up, let me take a page from Dr. Sowell's latest book. Everybody on this call, who's firstborn or only child? And I think 4 of us were either firstborn or only child. And we're there. And, my brother, I have 2 brothers. My middle brother, he's like this Fox News conservative who, if you try to talk philosophically about anything, he shuts it down. And my youngest brother, if you're not talking about sports or music to him, there's no conversation. So, yeah, I mean, I know I'm one data point, but I'm sure if we could go through the libertarian movement and look and see how many of the good thinkers, the great thinkers, were either firstborn or only children. Dr. Sowell's new book may some people might want to start looking at.
Yeah, really. Well, there is a great part of your book on page 77, Social Justice Warrior Logic 101. If it's not your experience, you are not allowed to have an opinion on the subject. Why is this 101? Why is this so important for the SJWs?
Well, I think I'm going to it right now. Okay. Social justice. So SJW logic in the real world. Yeah, this is the one where I talked about how, if you were going to interview people about how to get out of poverty, you should probably interview, if you're going to teach people how to get out of poverty, it would probably be best to talk to people who got out of poverty and are doing well for themselves. Now ask the question again, because I just wanted to say again.
I'm just curious, why is this so important? Because it seems like a pretty big tool that they use. In other words, you can't talk about X because you're not a woman, or you haven't experienced poverty, or you haven't experienced systemic, misogynistic, institutionalized racism.
Oh, this is an easy answer, and I think that anybody who really gives it a little bit of thought will be able to answer it, because they have no ideas, because they're not smart, they're not intelligent, and by having a conversation, you will expose that. You will expose the fact that they don't have any ideas. They don't have a good idea about how to solve poverty. They don't have a good idea about. They have no. They talk about the labor theory of value, stupid things like that. I mean, they have no idea what it's like to run a business and to try to operate in the black and to pay taxes and to to be competitive, that you may have to pay for your employees' health care. And they have no idea that when you look at a business's, if you were to do a pie graph of a business, the amount of profits. I mean, I know people who've started businesses who in the first, they've been in business for 5 years. The first 4 years, they didn't turn a profit. They were, they have a spouse that has a good job. And that basically that person has been supporting them, and so now they now after 5 years, 5 years of trying different things, now they're achieving a little bit of success, and now and they're employing people who are doing a lot better than they were doing before. But it's like the ANCOMs, the anarcho-communists, and the socialists, all these people, they like to say that working for a wage working for a wage is slavery. Yet in their ideal society, no one would be working for a wage. So what's that? I mean, these people, they don't have the reason they do not want to have conversations. The reason why, if you bring if they start talking about poor people and you start talking about ways to make people, to get people out of poverty, and their ideas are so moronic. They're so one-sided. They're so focused in one direction of, we need to, instead of getting these people out of poverty, we need to make everybody poor. So, anybody who's got money, we got to bring them down to this level. I mean, the logic would say, if you want to get people, if when I was poor, I didn't want people who were doing better than me. I didn't want the person I was working for to lose money. I didn't want them to have to start laying people. I didn't want them to have to lay me off. That's illogical. If you're at a place where you want to do better, you don't take the people above and try to make them poorer. That just makes everybody miserable. I mean, you're already starting from the premise that being poor is bad. Why are these people in poverty? Now you want to put everyone into poverty so that they can be equal? We have too many historical examples. We have current examples. I mean, I hate to bring up Venezuela, but look at Venezuela. Or the best example is the Koreas. After the Second World War, North Korea and South Korea were devastated. What did South Korea do? South Korea decided to institute a market economy. There were people who worked for a generation for $2 a day. Well, historically, we can look and we can see that societies that have come up out of poverty, like ours. I mean, dirt farmers, agrarian in the early 19th century, and then the Industrial Revolution comes along, and there was a point where kids had to work. Well, kids don't have, 12-year-olds don't have to work anymore. Even though our economy and the economy of South Korea isn't as free and laissez-faire as we would want it to be, it's a hell of a lot better than North Korea, which decided to go into a dictatorship, socialist, kind of experiment. And we see now that people are literally eating dirt. We see people escaping with these huge intestinal parasites, and they ask, well, how did this happen? It's like, well, they were literally eating dirt. And that's what these people want. Instead of looking at the real humanitarian wants poor people to improve their lot in life. You're an evil fuck if you want to make sure that if you want to bring everybody down to the level of the poor and make sure that and have everybody be as miserable as you are. And most of these people who are out here advocating for this shit are living off their parents' credit card anyway, so fuck them.
Well, another experiment was done where they just cut Germany in half pretty much, and half of it went more free market, of course, not totally in either direction. The West was much more free market than the East, which was handed over to Stalin. And dear God, look at the results there. Even in South America, you have places like Chile versus Venezuela. In Africa, you have places like Zimbabwe, Commeyville, and then you have Botswana, which is much more free market. On the bigger scale, you have America versus the Soviet Union, or America versus Mao's China. I mean, dear God, it's so obvious that that free people make more mutually beneficial transactions, and they create more wealth as a causal result of that. And the fact that we can't even explain that 5-second easy principle to people in 12 years of government education, 5 or 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, for 9 months out of the year, for 12 years, just incredible, man.
Well, and we'll be some of the first people to say that this crony capitalism, this corporatism that we have, is definitely not what we want. We would love to see laissez-faire, but so let me use the phrase. Okay, what we have is not real capitalism, And the Soviet Union had not real communism or not real socialism, which is something we hear from the left. Which one created a better quality of life overall, though? I mean, even the shittiest capitalism, even the shittiest corporatist, elitist oligarchical capitalism is a much better standard of living than what you saw in the Soviet Union with bread lines and, trying to apply to get a car, and you may get a car in 3 years if they allow it. I mean, it's that anybody would, who in the Soviet Union pulled themselves out of poverty any other way than basically bowing to the government and becoming a part of the government? I mean, people can pull themselves out of poverty here just by getting I hate to invoke Ben Shapiro because there's so many problems I have with Ben Shapiro, but he said, how do you get out of poverty? He said, finish high school and wait till you get married to have kids. That's like logic. That's one of the things that I can agree with him on. I hate his foreign policy and everything, but it's logical. Graduate high school. I might have said graduate college. Graduate high school and wait until you get married to have kids. And we have a whole segment of the population that was taught, that was basically taught that, the government's there to take care of you, and they abandoned that, and they've adopted this leftist, this Marxist ideology, and it's just destroyed it's destroyed 2 and 3 generations of their culture.
Yeah, and what Ben Shapiro is citing is actually a study by the Brookings Institute, and that just goes to show you that the recipe is so readily available, or let's just say much more readily available than it has been in the past, especially with the internet. People can tweet PDFs and all this stuff. It's so readily available, but what's still being discussed is confiscate money at gunpoint from this group and give it to this group, and making them dependent on the state. An interesting thing about equality is that it's always with money. Like, I hate the inequality between me and Paul Krugman, that his articles are read by trillions of people and very important people, and my articles have not been read that much. I wrote an article called "We Are Not the Government," if people want to see that. The other inequalities, Bill Maher has like 100,000 man hours a week that people watch of his. About 100,000 people watch for an hour, and I don't have that many views in my entire video archive. People hear Bernie Sanders speeches in the billions, and I hear very few. It's incredible that they can't even think consistently on something like this. Or the most blatant example is, we're against monopolies. Give the state a monopoly on single-payer healthcare and give the state a monopoly on AR-15s. How is it that the left can't think? They just can't at any level.
Well, there are some that can think, and they've become politicians, and they manipulate. They've learned to manipulate people, and to believe that the government's going to take care of you. It's the whole thing of, and the right side is no better. I mean, the right side is just like 5 years behind. The left was endorsing gay marriage, 5 years before the right does. The right always catches up. But it's the whole thing about voting too. Voting is evil on so many levels, but the fact is that you give this all-powerful monopoly power over so much, and what they're going to do is they're going to operate, and the ones that are voted into office, because I think that we can agree now that the government is 80% to 90% of government power is being wielded by people who aren't elected. What we call the deep state. These people who are there for generations and have been there for 2 or 3, been there for 2 generations, who just can't be fired because they're a government employee. Try firing a government employee. But the elected ones, they do all this populist bullshit, whether on the right or the left, to get elected. And I try to stay out of the open borders versus closed borders debate. I understand both sides. I could argue both sides. But one of the things that I saw recently, that it was someone memed it or something like, or they might have memed it. I don't remember where I saw it, but it said, if the people flowing over the borders illegally voted Republican, the Democrats would be building a wall 250 feet high. So I mean, it all comes down to people like to say, oh, well, we're a representative republic. Well, yeah, when was the last time a representative actually expressed your values, did what you wanted to do? No, we're a representative democracy, and democracy is the worst. Is the worst form of government besides all others. But democracy is particularly evil because fucking idiots vote, and these people are morons, and people who are oh, it's our civic duty and everything. And I said this when I was talking to Dave Smith the other night. People don't take voting as seriously as they need to. Okay, if you vote for somebody who comes into office and they drop a bomb on Hiroshima that kills 250,000 people, you're culpable for that along with them. I mean, you decided that we needed this government because there's so many monsters out there in the world, that you chose this person, and this person just committed democide on a grand scale, and that was your endorsement. That was you choosing this person. And people don't think like that. It's like, oh, well, I voted and now they're in there, and yep, wipe my hands clean. If you don't vote, you have nothing to complain about. It's like, well, you're responsible. I mean, anybody who voted for Donald Trump is responsible for the friggin' genocide that's going on in Yemen right now. Anybody who voted for Barack Obama is responsible for the slave trade in Libya right now. You have to take responsibility. You voted for that, man. Or you can say, stop voting. I don't need any rulers. And, say we need, maybe this whole voting thing is like being, maybe this whole voting thing is like somebody believing in slavery right now. Maybe us who say we don't need a state anymore, that we can do this on our own, the free market can do it. Maybe we're like, like Dave Smith likes to say, maybe we're like the abolitionists in 1850, where it's like, well, how are we going to survive if we don't have slaves, if we don't have people to tend the fields? How is this going to work? Well, we're basically all slaves now on a tax farm. Nobody owns any property. There's nothing you can do that isn't taxed or regulated. And people think, well, that's freedom. That's what freedom's all about. And to bring it back to these social justice warriors and the people I wrote about in the book, is that they know how to take advantage of that. Look, the reason I wrote this book is because people say that, oh, well, this can't happen here. It's already happened in Canada and Europe. I mean, there is misgendering laws in Canada and in California. And states are always an incubator for federal law. In Canada, people have done hard time for denying the Holocaust. In Germany, you deny the Holocaust, you go to jail. Mm-hmm. In Scotland, if you teach a pug how to sieg heil, you get convicted of a crime and you get an 850 pound fine. And I'm surprised they didn't put him in jail. I mean, this is all. How is this free? How is that freedom? And everything I talk about in my book is the ideology that caused all these laws in these other countries, and it's coming here. I mean, people say, oh, I really don't see Antifa around much anymore. They show up, maybe they're not calling themselves Antifa. Go to other countries. Antifa shows up to everything in Britain. Antifa shows up to everything in Germany. I mean, this is, and they may just change their name here, or maybe they're just hiding in the background. But we just had something in Noonan, Georgia this past weekend, where some Nazis decided that they wanted to march in Noonan, Georgia. They got a permit to do it, and Antifa showed up. And I really hate the outcome of what happened, because I really wish the police would have just let them kill each other, because both of those groups just neither one of them believes in freedom in any way, and they're both socialists. So both groups are socialists, and that's just the most diabolical friggin' ideology. But the police went in there and they were forcing people to take off their masks and everything. And it's very easy to say, oh, well, good, I hate Antifa, so they need to do that. No, I mean, that's fucking that's the police. That's the police stepping in, the arm of the state stepping in. And I mean, they were dressed like soldiers in Afghanistan. And I would rather just have those people kill each other, on the streets of Noonan, sweep up the bodies afterwards, have people protect their private property that could be damaged in the meantime, and let's just keep the police out of there. I mean, if somebody wants to hire private security to protect their property or something, or if somebody wants to bring private security to protect their person, I'm okay with that. But I mean, this is all madness, and it's all leading to something, and it's leading to the shit that I talk about in this book, man. It really is. I mean, that's why I said the other night that I have two books in my head that I want to write. And the next one would be much shorter. It would probably be more of a pamphlet. But the one after that would be probably more of like a book, not, like a real, I call this a primer. I call it my first book, a study guide. This would be like like something that, God, I won't even say Rothbard would write, but, something more along the lines of something more scholarly. But I still think that this book right here, 10, 20 years down the line, will be the work that I'll be most proud of, because this right here is a bigger threat right now than the government. I say that and I hear how it sounds, because my first book was completely against the government, but these people, the famous Breitbart line, politics is downstream from culture. These people are creating a culture, and they're going to make every attempt to use politics and use the government to enforce their beliefs. And once they do that, man, free speech is gone. Our ideology of voluntary exchange is gone. These people are the most dangerous force. These people are the most dangerous force in this country right now, and we need to educate people about it so that people can start speaking out against it.
Well, the main reason they decide to, in Hans Hoppe's book, A Theory of Socialism and Capitalism, he talks about, as government grows, political entrepreneurship grows too. People say, what am I going to spend my time, my hours, my resources? What am I going to do? I'm going to allocate time towards changing politics, instead of in a free market where they'd say, I'm going to spend my time, my resources, and my efforts meeting consumer demand, making trades, making myself and others wealthier. So as the state grows, you get a higher demand for people to seek to infiltrate the state. And the average leftist and liberal and conservative, I'd say, they get along generally when they're at the store, when I meet them for dinner or anything. The problem is there's this big, gigantic state that when one of them gets a hold of, the other is screwed, and vice versa. So that's why they're spending all this time trying to influence this thing. The problem is there shouldn't be this thing in the first place.
And that's the first thing I wrote in my preface. As I'm gonna scroll to it right now. Is I said the first couple lines of my preface is, let me put this out there immediately so there are no misunderstandings. I believe the ideology of Marxism, socialism, communism is a plague and has proven to be a disaster for mankind. If you read my first book, you know the only reason it's a threat to you is because there is an all-powerful state ready to implement its workings. And I had to put that right up front, because I mean, there are people who are going to read this. I know there are people who are going to read this book who are not ANCAPs. There are people who are going to pick up this book and they're going to be, mainstream conservatives and things like that. I have to put that message out there that, the state is the state is the reason that this is a problem is because the state exists. It's just like you said, if there was no state to enforce their ideas, I mean, the free market will take care of those ideas and flush them right down the toilet. But the state willing to, the state is always ready to listen to and implement the most vocal minorities' ideas, which is why I think libertarian ideas don't stand a chance anymore, because most of us don't want to play in that game, because we know, we realize that if you're not advocating to the state for something that gives them control, and nothing that we would advocate to the state for, my thing to tell the state was, okay, decriminalize this, decriminalize that, decriminalize this, and criminalize yourself. They're not going to like those ideas, but they're going to like the ideas of someone who goes to them and says, you really should pass a law that if I want to be called a Ligerkind and somebody calls me a he or a she, that person should be punished all the way up until being arrested. And if they resist arrest, shoot them. I mean, that's what the state is. People don't realize that. That's what the state is. The state is, you pass a law. As soon as you say, oh, there ought to be a law, and that law gets passed, there is the likelihood that somebody will die because of that law. Even something as small as a taillight being out on a car, because we've seen that too.
Well, I think the most blatant example that is in your face because it's on camera is Eric Garner, under suspicion of not paying cigarette taxes, was screaming at the top of his lungs, "I can't breathe," and they still killed him. As a causal result of their actions, he was dead. I'm not saying they planned on doing this, but they did it. It is their fault. Now, that is the most blatant example of a tax on cigarettes. What's so bad? Cigarettes are horrible. Not everyone does them. The tax is only like 10%. Well, I think where he was, it was more than 10%. That's why selling them on the black market was worth it. But something as trivial as a tax on cigarettes will get you killed if they deem you are resisting.
Yeah, and the Eric Garner case, that was actually one of the days in my first book. I talked about that. People say, "Oh, no one dies because they don't pay their taxes," and he's the perfect example. And I will say this: we always need to be reminded of this. The people give the state their power, and blindly following the state. When Eric Garner, after they killed Eric Garner, and people started to protest, there was a counter protest of police supporters who were wearing shirts like, "I don't care that you can breathe." They were basically mocking the fact that the government, and people love to forget that the local police are the government, that the government killed this guy over a tax. And then after they killed him, their fucked up supporters went out there and mocked his death. I mean, statists on the right. I mean, we're talking about the left. My book talks about the left. I'm not ignoring that the right, that some of the biggest scumbags and some of the biggest non-thinkers. We talk about how the left can't make an argument, how they're not real big thinkers. There aren't a lot on the right either.
So their shirt said, "I can breathe."
Yeah, that's what they said. Yeah, "I can breathe." Yeah.
And it's so incredible because you can have people that genuinely have empathy, but when it comes to the state, it's all lost. Whether you think it's fake empathy, that when you're talking to them about non-government subjects, it's amazing that everything can be lost. I mean, the average person will say, let's assume Al-Qaeda was behind 9/11. They'll say, there's no excuse for killing 3,000 innocent people. Those same people will advocate the bombing of Tokyo, Nagasaki, Hiroshima, Dresden, Pforzheim, Berlin, all these other places that were total civilianville. And they just can't hold these principles consistently. Well, our product of voluntarism is in such desperate need. That's why I'm grateful that people like you write books like this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, whatever we believe, there are many people who believe that the world is improving and that society is improving. I don't believe that. I believe that individuals are improving. I believe that there are more individuals that are waking up. There are more individuals that are willing to try and push forward and try to stop looking backwards. Another one of my recent podcasts is that libertarianism, and under libertarianism, I honestly believe the only libertarianism is anarchism, voluntarism, and capism. If you're still advocating for a state and you call yourself a libertarian, I think it's a misnomer. I don't think you should be thrown in jail. I'm not going to beat you up over it, but I just think that you're lost. But where was I going with this? The recent podcast where libertarianism is not conservative is libertarians don't look back for anything. Lord Acton said, if you look back for anything, it's just to see for basic morality, to see what your basic morality would be. He said that that the libertarian, that the liberty-minded person should always be in perpetual revolution. And he said this before, Trotsky adopted that phrase. And that's why I can't get down with conservatism, because conservatisms are looking back to a better time that didn't exist. Maybe it did. I mean, looking back in time looking back to the good old days is a very modern idea. People in the 1700s weren't looking back. People in the 1700s who had just discovered how to properly, clean out a wound so you didn't have to cut someone's arm off, weren't looking back 50 years to when they didn't know that. I mean, it's looking back is detrimental. And so you have that group that's constantly looking back and trying to conserve something that doesn't need to be conserved. And then you have people running around calling themselves liberals and progressives and all this, who they're not looking forward either. They're like living in the present and trying to control, trying to use control for the present, maybe looking to the future. But I mean, is the future they're looking to is they want to make things like the past, like the Soviet Union, which which was reported, which they'll tell you was actually a paradise, and it's all propaganda. They'll tell you North Korea right now is a paradise, and it's all propaganda that's coming out that it's not, and that Venezuela is the fault of capitalism, and you just have these complete lunatics out there who are looking to the state, are looking to failed ideas. And they're not looking to the future. They're not looking to God. I mean, And I always use the idea of these pictures behind me are patents of Tesla's. And Tesla wasn't a real big patent guy. He always said he didn't mind if somebody stole his ideas as long as they made them better. But if Tesla hadn't run into these corporatists and crony capitalists, and his ideas would have been out there, what the world, he was talking about taking energy out of the atmosphere and just basically making it free for people. Now, I don't know how good making energy free for people would be, because when you make things free for people, they have a tendency to take advantage of it and make it really shitty. but you know, turn it shitty, even good ideas. But you know, he was looking to the future. He wasn't a conservative, and if we're not leading the charge to look towards the future and not look back to the past, trying to conserve something that wasn't any good. I mean, the 80s wasn't as cool as people think it was. You know, the 90s wasn't as cool as people remember. The 2000s was a fucking horror show of war. You know, what are you looking back towards? You're looking back to the 50s? You know, 90% tax rates on corporations, and you know, it just total shit show, a total shit show economically that leads to, you know, that led to the going off the gold standard in 1970, which has caused $21 trillion worth of debt, you know, and mostly shit in the last 15 years and endless wars. I mean, stop looking back, man. We got to be looking to the future, and we got to be looking for something, you know, we got to be looking for something better.
And I see such pathetic examples. Bill Maher had Jordan Peterson on, and he was talking about how Bill Maher is saying that he has gained a new respect for George W. Bush.
Yeah,
because his criticisms of Trump are so trivial, because if you get to the principles of why Trump is bad, it also applies to the Democrats. So he'll say, you know, say what I disagreed with Bush and Romney, but they were so tolerable. I'm like, do you remember not investigating 9/11, invading Afghanistan when they didn't have to, taking down the Taliban when they didn't have to, starting the opium growing, lying us into Iraq War II, doubling the debt, implementing 2.5 times the amount of regulation as was implemented under Bill Clinton, and not making sure there was a free market to stop the financial crisis, and creating a moral hazard for it to happen in the future with the troubled asset relief package. Really, Bill Maher, really, you can't see 10 years ago when you were grilling the guy.
Millions and millions of people dead in another country from starvation and from bombings and from bullet wounds and from infection. You know, that's so much more acceptable than a president that gets on Twitter and starts insulting people. You know, Thaddeus Russell said, you know, Thaddeus Russell said that the reason he thinks that progressives and leftists hate Trump is because Obama was the cool, you know, it was the cool dad. Trump's not the cool dad. Trump's the dad that you want, if you're bringing friends over the house, you want to hide him because he's going to embarrass you. It's like they would rather have a murderous, you know, regime, which, I mean, Trump is, you know, let's not sugarcoat it. Trump is has actually stepped up the bombings that, you know, Obama was doing for 8 years. But in many other things, you know, in a couple other things, he's sought to pull back a little bit, which, you know, I'll take anything at this point, you know, just stop, you know, and, you know, but it's more important that they have someone that's not wearing, you know, they have a president that's not fat and, you know, it doesn't have a toupee and doesn't have, you know, doesn't know how, you know, I mean, I'd be surprised if Trump has a 110 IQ, and goes off on Twitter, which, you know, now it's been revealed that he doesn't even do those tweets. He has someone writing those tweets for him. And, you know, that's what it is. It's, you know, and Trump's not going to call, you know, Trump's not going to call somebody Zir or Z, you know, he's going to call him he or her. That's what this is all about. They don't give a fuck that you know, people are shitting themselves to death in Yemen. There is no even, you know, the great thing about the left historically was, you know, you could always count on them to be anti-war. They're not even anti-war anymore. They don't care that fucking kids are dying in Yemen right now, and that there's a slave trade in Libya that was created by Obama and Hillary Clinton. They're scum. I mean, they're worried about somebody embarrassing them at a party.
Well, they're more worried about slavery that existed 150 years ago than slavery caused by Obama like 3 years ago.
I mean, there was a guy on Twitter like right after the inauguration last year, and I was going back and forth with him, and he was talking about the gay people were going to be put in camps, and Jews were going to be, ignoring the fact that every one of Trump's kids is married, to someone of Jewish background. I mean, he's just ignoring all this fucking shit, and it's mindless outrage. And we've already talked about this. They don't have minds. They can't think. They're all emotion. They're all, a couple of them have thoughts. A couple of them are able to scheme on how to, do certain things to repress people and to get the government to do their will, and especially the ones in the universities, to get their students to do their will and go out there and preach these, ideologies of murder and hate and horror. But I mean, for the most part, they're just fucking, they're idiots, and they're just the emotion, and I don't see, and most of the emotion coming out of the right too. You can't even have a conversation with people on the right anymore. They just, libtard. It's like, what the fuck is that? It's like, that's not as Molly meme would say, that's not an argument. Come on, man.
I know. The interesting thing is, Bill Maher and my dad came up with the same argument. They said, Trump said I could go out on Fifth Avenue, shoot someone, and I wouldn't lose any votes. And that's the worst thing you can do. So Trump, there's just no going down from there. I don't care what happens with North Korea. Trump doesn't deserve anything. And I said, so what is the principle behind that? Killing innocent people is bad? Obama, Roosevelt, your two heroes, killed way more innocent people than killing one person on Fifth Avenue. So you're actually worse than the worst thing you can say about Donald Trump. That's the left. They're memorizing mind control bullet points, and that's all statism is. It's just a bunch of mind control words to justify violence isn't violence when government does it. And the left is the worst part of that. That's all statism is.
And then when you point that out to them, the cognitive dissonance kicks in, and they're just, well, that's totally different because, the state's supposed to do that.
Man, I got 6 lightning round questions for you. Okay. And then I'm going to let you go. Other than that, I'm conscripting you into these last 6 questions. Okay. What is the most important thing you learned from Dave Smith?
To pay more attention to culture.
What is the most important thing you learned from Lew Rockwell?
That the state must be destroyed.
What is the most important thing you learned from Scott Horton?
Man, when I talk about war now, I almost want to cry. I'm getting emotional right now just thinking about war. It's just the hell that is war. Also, another thing Scott Horton taught me recently was when you argue with either the left or the right, argue from their standpoint. Don't point out their hypocrisies. Don't argue at the left with right talking points. Don't argue at the right with left talking points. Argue it both from their own talking points to show them how ridiculous they are.
Scott and I were talking about that the other day. I wanted to do a show on Waco or the My Lai massacre with Scott, and we ended up getting into how do you communicate to people? And it's like, well, why shouldn't the government regulate your business, Mr. Right Statist? Well, it's mine. They shouldn't tell me what to do. It's a violation of property rights. Yeah, exactly. Isn't bombing a freaking village and invading it for decades a violation of property rights? Isn't taxation, which funds these motherfucking wars, isn't that a violation of property rights? Isn't Abu Ghraib and Hiroshima a violation of property rights, my man? Come on. So, yes, I love Scott Horton for the same reasons. What's the most important thing you learned from Murray Rothbard?
Oh, man. That you don't need that you don't need to have a state in order to have a functioning society.
If you could give everyone one book to read that isn't yours, what book would that be?
And they would definitely read it.
Yes.
They would have to read it.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is so obvious, but Anatomy of the State by Rothbard.
And finally, why are you a libertarian anarchist, voluntarist, anarcho-capitalist?
I have no idea. I have no idea. Well, I mean, I guess I was always, and it took me listening to Ron Paul absolutely destroy Rudy Giuliani in a 2007 debate to understand exactly what I stood for. And then by looking up Ron Paul and seeing who his influences were, that led me to Rothbard. And then by reading Rothbard, and I don't think I read Anatomy of the State first. I think I read For a New Liberty first. And that was, that cemented it. I mean, it put it in my mind. I called myself an anarchist at that point, but I don't think I was really an anarchist until I read Lou Rockwell's The Left, the Right, and the State, which is a book that a lot of people haven't read, which they really should, because it's I mean, people talk about his the Anarcho-Capitalist Manifesto. What the hell is the name? What's the hell is Rockwell's book? That's the manifesto?
Against the State.
Yeah, Against the State. That's a great book. But man, go read. People need to read Left, the Right, and the State. Man, it is. It's fascinating. People I've recommended it to and have read it. They're just like, oh my god, it's like, he starts off by making arguments against drunk driving laws, and and it's just, I mean, it's so beautiful. But then he gets into war. Then he gets into foreign policy, and man, that's really where it's at. So
I want to finish off reading. Well, I just want to thank you for writing this book. I mean, people need to realize that the communists, the socialists, the fascists are willing to put their lives on the line for their ideology. That's a total scam. We need to be willing to share videos, share articles, make videos, write our own articles, make memes. At least, at the bare minimum, we need to be willing to do that. Or I think we should just hand them the total power of this, because that's giving up. They're willing to put their lives on the line. We're afraid to tell someone, if you advocate taxation, you advocate violence. Well, here's a great one. This is a Bernie Sanders quote, and it says, maybe, just maybe, after 18 school shootings in America in just the last 43 days, Congress might want to consider common sense gun legislation and save innocent lives. And that got 48,000 likes and 22,000 retweets. The left is willing to blatantly lie about politics, morality, and economics. Let's be willing to tell the truth. Mance, brother, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Always a pleasure, man. You're for your age and your time spent on this earth. I wish I had the mind for liberty at your age. I wish when I was your age, I wish I had half the knowledge that you had as far as liberty-minded and anti-authoritarianism. As far as anti-authoritarianism goes, man, always a pleasure talking to you.
Well, thank you for saying that, because at about 18, I traded friends, popularity, and good health for books and education. So it's little comments like that that make it worth it. Take care, man. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, man.